and welcome back to AR77. Today's video is all about how to aim your gun, and in particular, because I kind of focus on handguns on the channel, that's where our focus is going to sit. It might seem like a really fundamental thing, but some people get confused about how to adjust things like sights or what the difference is between sight alignment and sight picture, and what does hold mean, and this and that and the other, especially if you've got into replica collecting just because you actually like the guns themselves and hadn't really thought about shooting. When it comes to shooting, it makes sense to kind of know what you're talking about and know what you're doing ahead of time. So this might be preaching to the choir for a lot of you, but I would also say it never hurts to go back to those kind of fundamental elements when it comes to guns. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to do it in two parts. The first part, I'm going to take you through a series of guns from my collection and just kind of familiarise you with the different types of kind of sights that you might find on whatever pistol or revolver or whatever it is that you purchase. Obviously, I'm in a fortunate position where I can show you a number of different air guns. You might have one in your collection, you might have more. So hopefully I'll either represent what sights are on your gun or something similar. But I'll take you through the kind of the different ones. And then in the second part of the video, we are going to look at actually the sort of the technique behind aiming a gun and how you try and get a decent alignment and decent sight picture. But I'll come to that when we come to it. For now, please, if you wouldn't mind just hitting that subscribe button, hit the bell, do like and share and all that malarkey. It just helps the channel to grow. We do continue to grow slowly but surely, and that's all down to you. So thank you very much for your continued support. All right, let's get into this and look at a number of different sort of sights across a number of different guns. So as you can see here, we have the Colt Single Action Army, or the Peacemaker, if you will, and it doesn't get much more sort of simple than this. Here you have a front kind of sight post, if you will, and you have this groove there just above the cylinder, and the way that you would have to, if you were going to aim this gun for accuracy, you'd have to try and get that post between that groove, get it sat there like that so that you've got a nice straight line between the front of the gun and the rear of the gun, and that's how you would aim that gun. It's not going to be, it's not the most accurate, but actually it serves its purpose. I guess it's pretty accurate, to be fair, but I don't necessarily assume that in the old West or wherever else these guns were utilised, I don't imagine people were lining up their sights like that, other than when they were practicing or training before use. I think in the heat of the moment, it was kind of a point and shoot kind of a deal. But that's pretty basic there on the Colt Single Action Army, just that groove there, that channel, if you will, and that front sight post. Let's get that out of the way. That kind of method is kind of continued onto a lot of the kind of more historic guns. You've got the 1911 here, the RAC, and again you can see obviously it's a semi-automatic pistol, but you've got that basic front sight post there, a little bit weathered, and you've got that sort of notch at the back, and you line them up. Nothing really else to aid your aim other than the absence of something at the back and the presence of something at the front or the muzzle end of the gun. Once again, on a revolver, we've got the S25 here, we've got again just that post at the front, no markings, and that notch at the back. There's a bit more going on with these sights, but we'll come to that later in terms of that actual, just that picture, which is the picture created by the rear sight and the front sight. That is what you get from a more basic revolver sight like that. And then things start to get a bit more guided, if you will. So if we've got the Colt Defender here, you can see you've still got that kind of notch at the back, but on that front sight post, you've just got a single white, you can't see it, there you go, you've got that single white dot just to help you get that kind of sight acquisition a little bit easier. You can see when that dot is kind of in the center of that notch at the back there. Again, if we look at a revolver like the 629, again you've got that notch at the back, and you've got in this case, a red kind of pointer there on the front of that sight post. So a white dot on the on the defender, and a little red marker, if you will, on the front of the 629. That's not always the case. Sometimes, like with the Taurus PT92 or the KWC PT92 here, we have nothing on the front sight there. We have this kind of notch at the back, but we actually have a white dot in the center of the rear sight, I guess, so that you can kind of just line it up perfectly with that front sight post and get your sight picture that way. So it's just a different method, but they are kind of variations on a theme. My personal favorite, I would say, is again quite prevalent across a number of different guns, this being the VP9, and that is a white dot at the front and white dots at the rear. For me, that is my favorite kind of sight picture. It's not too intrusive. I find it really useful. I'm not often shooting at night or in low level conditions or anything like that, because I'm not an operator or anything like that. This is just a bit of a fun hobby, so it's usually either indoors or outdoors in fairly visible conditions or fairly good visibility, and I happen to really like that two sort of white dots at the back and one white dot at the front, and you'll see that across a whole host of weapons. There are again variations on that, I should say. Can't speak properly today, which isn't great if you're running a YouTube channel. Again, it's the same kind of concept. This is the Walther PPQ M2, same concept, but you get hair on the rear sight with this one. I don't think that comes as a factory standard. Yeah, you've got just coloured dots. Now you might prefer that actually. You might go, actually, yeah, those colours stand out to me. You can see that they are pretty bright, those kind of orange dots, when you compare them to the white ones. So that might be preferable to you. For me, although I think they're really great and really good functional sights, I prefer just the white, actually. I don't know why that is. It's just a personal preference. One other gun that I would show you is the P365 by SIG. This I do like, actually. I do like that green kind of pops out at the front there between those white sights at the back. White dots at the back, I should say. I do quite like that kind of configuration. It's more like almost reminiscent of a kind of a night sight, if you will. But yeah, that green really pops. I don't know what you think. Do you like that green, or do you prefer the kind of the orange that you get on the PPQ? Or where's that? Bring that VP9 back. Do you prefer just the standard white dots? I don't know, it's entirely personal preference really, and it might be affected by if you have eye conditions and things like that. I don't know. So moving on from those kind of basic markings, you also have some kind of posher guns, I guess you could say, with what you might call kind of target sights, and they'll use fibre optic kind of technology. It sounds kind of weird calling it that. This is the CZ75 or CZ75 SP01 Shadow by ASG, and as you can see, there's no markings at the rear there, but you have quite a clear fibre optic sight at the front there, allowing you to get a decent sight alignment there between those two posts at the back. Similar to that, we have the XDM, the Springfield Armory XDM. Again, that has the kind of fibre optic at the front, but this has the white dots at the back, so it's kind of the best of both worlds, if you will. Again, it does catch the light, that fibre optic. It does make it easy for sight acquisition, if you will. Of course, if you want to be really posh, you might get something like you might have something like these sights, like we have on the Combat Master here, which is the fibre optic at the rear there, and the fibre optic at the front. Again, this is kind of the green fibre optic, so it pops a little bit more. It looks better in reality than it does there, but you can see how you can quite easily find that green at the front and that green at the rear there as well. Where's the XDM? So I don't know what you'd prefer at the front there, green or red. Again, entirely up to you. Okay, just one more sight picture that I wanted to bring to the table, because I'm sure that some of you will be shouting, what about the Glock? Glock, we have the dot at the front there. You pick that up. We've got that white dot at the front, but we have this kind of a half picture frame or kind of a trough at the back there. And again, it just serves the same purpose. It's just a different way of doing the same thing. Some people really like this. Some people prefer the dots. It's not just Glock. Also on the CZ75 P07 Duty, we also have the same kind of theory with that white dot at the front and that kind of half picture frame at the back. I call it a half picture frame because I think on an early video somebody referred to it in the comments as that, so I've kind of picked that up thinking, oh, I've learnt something there. I don't know if that is the official term for it, but you can also actually see here you've got kind of two dots for marks, so you could with the CZ here, you could, I guess, black that out, and you could quite easily just point those with a little bit of ink, not ink, paint or whatever you want to use to make those dots instead of that kind of half a box, if you will. And a lot of people will, if they have a gun that doesn't have a marking at the front, like the Taurus, they will just put a mark on the front of there because it just makes it easier to find that kind of that front sight post. Okay, so that's a kind of a very quick rundown of a number of different types of sights, iron sights you might find across handguns, particularly based on the ones that I've got kind of in front of me. You might have a different gun that has completely different sights, but I'm willing to bet the vast majority of guns fall under one of those types that I've just shown you. Beyond that, you've got scopes that you can put on top of pistols. A scope would magnify something which is further away. You've got red dots or reflex sights, which kind of provide a bit of a kind of a heads-up display. It's kind of an LED which reflects a dot off a surface, which is kind of like almost like a mirrored surface, so it reflects the red light. But other light can pass through, so you can see what's kind of beyond the front of the gun, but you have the red dot in your sights. You could use those, and you can also get lasers which kind of pinpoint exactly where the gun is aiming, so you don't need to actually be behind the gun to see where the muzzle is directed. So kind of red dots are only visible to yourself, whereas lasers are visible to everyone, really. But today we're just looking at how to aim with these kind of out-of-the-box iron sights. Okay, so let me get these guns off the table, and we'll move into kind of part 2, which is all about aiming. So for this, we will go back to the trusty VP9, the HK VP9 by Umarex, and I'm going to use this just because it has those white dots, as I mentioned before, so it's quite easy to kind of illustrate. And I've put together some kind of images as well to help illustrate my point, so I'll try and keep what I'm doing in this kind of half of the screen, and any illustrations I use to kind of, well, illustrate a point, I'll keep on this side. Now, there are other factors to take into consideration when you're aiming a gun, particularly if you feel like your aim is off. It can be down to how you're holding the gun. You know, as far as possible, you want to be up there as close as you can, so that it's a straight line between the kind of the barrel and your arm, really. Ideally, you'd kind of hold it there and point it like that, and you'd know that where your finger was pointing, that's where your gun was shooting. So you want to be right up there. So if people hold it like that and it's a blowback gun, it's going to throw that gun all over the shop and you might be off. Other things, you know, if you're holding the gun and you're squeezing it too tight, it can send it sort of, if I squeeze that, you can see how it kind of pushes it sort of to the left a little bit and down a little bit. So if I hold it quite relaxed but firm, that's okay. If I squeeze it too hard, it kind of sends it off there to the left. So that can be a factor. All sorts of things like that. But really, we're just going to focus today on the fundamentals. Now, a lot of people, when they're beginning shooting or when they're first sort of starting off, it feels more comfortable to close one eye while you're shooting. If you've got the gun in front of you like that, it seems kind of instinctive just to close one eye and focus with the other at what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that, and people, you know, you'll see a lot of videos where people recommend you keep both eyes open, and I try to do that now. I'm trying to sort of teach myself to shoot both eyes open, but there's no real benefit to that. I mean, I guess there is if you're in a real situation, if you're in law enforcement, or if you're professional soldier or whatever it is, or you're in a country where you have a gun for personal defense and you're allowed to do that, then yes, you might want to learn to shoot with both eyes open, because it gives you better kind of peripheral vision. But there's no harm if you're just target shooting in keeping one eye closed. As far as I'm aware, I've kind of taught myself to shoot with both eyes open just for an exercise, really, just for fun. But I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of blinking one eye, or winking one eye, or closing one eye, I should say. But it might be worth kind of finding out which is your dominant eye. You might hear about eye dominance when people are talking about aiming, and that is because we tend to have one dominant eye, of if we're fortunate enough to have two. It's worth saying that your dominant eye isn't necessarily on the same side as your dominant hand. So you might shoot more comfortably with your right hand. You might be right-handed, but your left eye might be the dominant eye. How to check what your dominant eye is? Well, if you kind of make a triangle, just kind of like that with your fingers and thumbs, look at something far into the distance. Let's say you had something like that right away in the distance, and make your little triangle like that. And then if you bring that triangle closer and closer and closer to your face, it will move towards one eye or the other. So if you test, by closing each eye in turn, you will see which eye you are seeing that capsule or that point in the distance through the triangle with. So that's one way of finding out which eye you are dominant with. And as I said before, it might be that you are left eye dominant but right-handed, or vice versa, or it might be that your right hand side is your best side for your eye and your hand. I don't know, but that's one way of finding out what your dominant eye is. So let's look at sight alignment. Sight alignment is making sure you have your front post and your rear sights in alignment with each other. So if I hold that gun like that, you can see that you've got the front post at the front there, rear post at the rear, and they are this kind of an equal distance. I mean, I'm shaking, but I'll show you on the picture here. Good sight alignment, there should be an equal distance on either side of that front post in this rear notch. And it should be kind of flat across the top. In fact, just because there's a curve to the rear sights on the VP9, I'm going to switch to the old reliable 1911. This is the Spartan, and as you can see, it's got kind of flatter sights across the top, so it just makes the point easier to illustrate. So it should be that you are flat across the top like that, and there's a fairly equal distance of space between that front post and the rear sights. That's how your sights should look. So if your front post is to the left, you're going to shoot a little bit to the left. If your front post is slightly to the right, you're going to shoot slightly to the right. If it's in the center, ideally you'll be shooting straight. Now obviously with some guns, this kind of notch at the back is more narrow or broader. Let me just get the earlier 1911 A1. As you can see, I know it's got no dots, but that rear sight is far more narrow, so there's less room for maneuver there to keep that front sight post in between those rear sights. So that should make your alignment quite accurate. There's a little bit of wiggle room here, but as long as you've got an equal amount of, as I said, kind of space on either side, you should be looking okay. So in terms of that front post, we've talked about either side. Again, if the front post is up like that, or as I'll show you in the picture here, you're going to shoot higher, you're going to shoot up. And if you can't see your front post because it's lower than your rear sights, you're going to be shooting down. Okay, if that front post is there and it's equal either side and flat across the top, you should be shooting straight. That's sight alignment in a nutshell. There's a different term, sight picture, which is when you have your kind of sight alignment, and then you can also take into consideration what is beyond it, i.e. your target. If you have your sight alignment like that, and in front of that is the center of your target, that is your sight picture. Okay, then you might want to consider things like what we call hold. So again, I'll use the slides to show you. There's a number of different types of where you can hold the gun. You have center hold, where your front sight kind of splits the target across the center. Hopefully you can see that with the illustration on screen there. You can see that your sight picture, or your sight alignment rather, kind of splits the center of the target. There's a different one called combat hold, which is where your front sight doesn't just split it at the sort of the midway point, it completely covers the target. And then we also have what we call 6 o'clock hold, which is where your front sights sit just below the target. And actually what I find with my PX4 Storm here, the Beretta PX4 Storm, what I find is I'm for the most part, I like to shoot my guns with that kind of center hold, so they sort of split the target. But with the PX4 here, which another hair, God, animals. With the PX4 here, because this gun shoots kind of high for some reason, I've got all sorts of issues with this. The magazine placement, I might have to replace the magazine, possibly even take this apart and have a look at it. But anyway, I digress. It shoots kind of high, so I find myself aiming at kind of 6 o'clock because I know the bullet's going to shoot up. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not entirely sure. I did refer to it as a bullet, didn't I? It's just a pellet. So there you go. Yeah, I tend to favour the centre hold, but with the PX4, I do kind of use a 6 o'clock hold, and your hold will differ based on kind of how far you're shooting as well. So we have good sight alignment. We've got our front post between our rear sights. We've got that hold decided upon. We're sure where we want to kind of hold. We're sure kind of where we want to sort of aim towards our target. We've got that sight picture. We can see the target behind our sights. Now, where is our focal point? Where is our focus? There's 3 basic areas you can focus. You can focus on the target, obviously, if you choose to. You could focus on that rear sight, but generally, it's best to focus on the front sight because that kind of splits the difference between the furthest point you're looking at and the closest point you're looking at. So that front post really is where your attention should be. You should be focusing on that front sight post while keeping the others kind of in mind but perhaps out of focus, contrary to what you see on screen there. Okay, so let's say you start shooting and things aren't quite going to plan and you're missing the target and you think it's because your sights are not in alignment. If you're fortunate enough to have a gun that has adjustable sights at the rear here, you can do something about it. So if you're aiming like that through your gun and you are shooting low, then what you want to do is raise your rear sights. Because if you're shooting low and you raise your rear sights, imagine you're aiming like that, and then you raise your rear sights, you can no longer see that front post, so you'd have to raise the front of the gun to get that sight alignment once again. Yeah. So if you're shooting low, you want to raise your rear sights, and it will force you to point the muzzle end of your gun up to acquire that sight alignment. If you're shooting high, you want to do the opposite. If you're shooting left, if you find that gun shoots left, you want to move this rear sight right, because if you take that sort of sight alignment there, if we move the rear sight right, I know I'm moving the gun, but imagine we're just moving the sight. If we move that right, it forces you to bring the front of the gun round to the right to meet it and get that sight picture or that sight alignment. So if you're shooting left, move the rear sight right, and it will force you to twist the gun around to the right to get that kind of sight picture. Again, if you're shooting right, just do the opposite. Obviously, there's a limit to the adjustment, at which that you can make, even on a gun that is kind of adjustable for windage and elevation, like the S25 is. At which point you're reliant on adjusting your hold, really, especially taking into account things like trajectory or heavy wind. But if you're shooting off at any great distance, which you're probably not with something like that, but if you are, if you're shooting over a greater distance, you might want to shoot above the target, and like I said with my PX4, I use that kind of 6 o'clock hold. I have to kind of hold it just beneath the target because I know it's going to shoot up because of the way it's kind of made. However, wherever you're kind of aiming, wherever you're holding on the target, your sight alignment should always remain true. So you should always have that. Let me get the VP9 in again so it's clearer. You should always have that good sight alignment. You should always have your front post between your rear posts, and you should always have kind of a flat picture across the top there, regardless of whether or not you're holding above or below the target, to the left or to the right of the target. You should always keep that sight alignment the same. And don't be tempted to twist the gun. If you're shooting like that and you go, oh, the gun's shooting off to the right, don't be tempted to hold it like that. I know that's a bit extreme, but don't be tempted to twist the gun like that. If it's shooting to the right a little bit, hold it to the left. Let me do that properly. If you're shooting to the right, don't twist your gun so it shoots further left. Move yourself to the left and get that sight alignment properly focused in. Yeah. So don't twist the gun. Keep your sight alignment and your sight picture consistent throughout. You might have to aim above or below or to either side. So there you have it. I think once you get confident, you can perhaps teach yourself to shoot with both eyes open if you wish. When you have both eyes open, your sight picture, what you'll be able to see will have, you'll have kind of these shadow images, these blurred images of a second gun off to one side or the other. But you'll get used to that, and you'll get used to keeping your attention and focus where it needs to be. But as I said before, shooting with both eyes open, it's not a prerequisite for those of us who are just, hobbyists and collectors. It's a benefit if you're moving and switching targets on the fly. So, if you've set up a bit of a course in your garden, it might be a bit disorienting or disorientating. Never get that right. Disorienting. It might be disorienting to keep opening and closing one eye, so you might be better off, especially if you're walking over rough ground, you might be far better off keeping both eyes open so you can see where you're stepping. If you were hunting or whatever, you want to keep both eyes open so you can see what's in your peripheral vision. And if you're in a defensive situation, not with one of these, but if you're training for real firearm use and you're just using this as a practice, obviously you want to retain as much kind of situational awareness as possible. But beyond that, you can feel quite free to just keep one eye closed if that's easier for you. If you're just shooting cans in the back garden or whatever it is. That's it. If I've left anything out, please do let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will. Once again, please like the channel, share it with your friends and family and those people you don't even like. Or maybe they come under that first category of friends and family. Subscribe to the channel. It helps me. It helps grow the channel, and hit that bell so you're notified of any future videos. For now, please do take care, stay safe. All the very best to you all. Bye.